We all know the people who went to Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, and they're just not going to have peace until they have financial security.
Right.
And so they're chasing the dollar. And then my great hope for them is that after they scratch that itch, they'll hop over to the passion path later. And then the balance path, which is the one that I did. It's you've decided early on you want your passion and your work to be the same thing, but you're going to take your time getting there. You're going to build financial security. You're going to build skills. You're going to build network, brand. You're going to build what it is you need to increase the probability of success when you switch over to work at your passion later in life. That's the balance path. It's very intentional. There's a lot of people that have this philosophy, which I quite like. A third of your life is learning, a third of your life is earning, and a third of your life is giving back. There are a lot of people on the independent path that retire, and then they spend 10, 20 years following their passion after they've retired.
This is Joe Phoenix, and welcome to episode 5 of the IVI Podcast, where I talk with innovators and visionaries, and now authors, making an impact. And I think you're going to love this discussion with George Appling and his journey to what he calls passionpreneurship. His insights and observations that led him ultimately to create a Renaissance fair from scratch and write a book on his journey are extremely timely, whether you've been in business forever or just getting started. And I think you'll love his perspective on business and life. So let's head to the fair. George Appling, welcome to the IVI Podcast, my man. How you doing?
Great, Joe. How are you?
I'm great. It's a beautiful Friday afternoon here in Boston. All the leaves are changing. It's 60 degrees out. It's, weather like this gets me going. I don't know about you, but this fall weather just is, it's magnificent here. So,
Same. Yeah, I love it.
It's got to be great for the thing that we'll talk about a little bit later too. This got to be a perfect time of year to have people out at that fair and doing all that cool stuff. So a little bit jealous.
That's why the big one, the biggest Renaissance Festival in the country, is the one for Houston, and it's open now, October, November.
Sweet. So we'll come back to that, but welcome on the IBI Podcast. You check all the boxes for me. Innovator, visionary, huge impact that you've had in your career, writing a book for impact, living a life of purpose. I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation, and just going through your background, you've had a really interesting life, and I think the listeners here are going to be able to pull a lot out of this. So
I hope so.
Yep, looking forward to it. So here's what I want to do. I want to break this into thirds today. Okay, and we're going to talk directly about the book, and we're going to sprinkle the book around because so many of the themes that you have compiled in that book, and that book is right back here on I call it my shelf of fame. Once I get a larger following, maybe I'll have a wall of fame, but right now it's a shelf of fame. But I found that book to be super compelling, and there are thousands of business books out there. You and I were talking about this. Generally, I can read a business book in like one sitting, and I kind of start at the beginning and then go to the end and sprinkle some things in the middle. I found yours a good read all the way through. So we'll spend some time and talk about that. But I want to talk about the journey. I want to talk about the book, and then I want to talk about the kingdom, because I think that all of those things kind of link in together. But why don't we start with the journey, because we're going to talk about a lot of things here, and you've built and have a lot of really interesting insights. I think for the people listening to the podcast, let's talk about how you arrived at some of these insights and some of the experiences that you've had, because, I look at your educational background and I look at your work background. I mean, the first question that I have is, who needs 2 master's degrees from Harvard, right? I mean, it's like, it feels to me like you have always been someone who you find something and then you just go for it to the max. And maybe that's an overgeneralization, but could you walk the listeners through your early career and just kind of how you got on the path that you got on?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give an overview of my my career path, but I'm going to start by answering the question, why 2 master's degrees?
Yeah.
I think it's a fun, I don't know if it's a fun story. I think it's an important story, especially for young people. It starts when I was about 20 years old. I was at Texas A&M University. I was studying accounting, and I'd gotten like a 4.0 for a year or two. And back then what had happened was there was this guy named J. Wayne Stark. And see, he was sort of this magic man on the mountain. He was the retired director of the Memorial Student Center, which is a big deal at A&M. Mm-hmm. And if you made a 4.0 for, a year or so, he would send someone out to tap you on the shoulder, like literally. Someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Mr. Stark wants to speak with you."
Oh,
right. And it's like, it's this big thing, And his advice, which I took, was, keep studying a degree that's useful, like accounting will get you a job. Mm-hmm. But you're at a world-class institution with world-class professors in a lot of different topics, and you would be remiss to just go through this place without taking advantage of these opportunities. So he handed me...
What amazing advice.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're a student and you're myopic and you're 4.0 and you're going down that path, and someone comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, broaden your horizons, that's awesome.
That's it. So he gave me a piece of paper with like 20 classes on it, and he says, these courses are taught by genuinely world-class academics. You should take this stuff. And so I did. And it was Shakespeare, medieval history, philosophy of art, metaphysics. I mean, all sorts of global politics, just all this stuff that I found fascinating. And so then I got
you got 2 bachelor's degrees as well, right?
Well, and that's what happened is I got to, the end of my accounting degree and realized 2 more classes and I could have a political science degree. So I just stayed a summer and I got 2 degrees. And so that philosophy stayed with me in graduate school, which is I'm going to get a degree that's useful, meaning it's marketable. You can get a job with it, but I'm also going to get a degree that I'm passionate about. I love the topic itself. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I did the master's degree in business, which was useful, and in government, which I found fascinating.
I'll tell you what's amazing is I didn't know that, and we could almost stop the podcast here because that's like the greatest advice you could give someone who's like going into, the kind of formative years of education, to kind of broaden those horizons. I did a terrible job of that when I was in college. You got stuck in the economics department or the business department. You just kind of went down that path, and you did not. I was at a liberal arts college, and I didn't take advantage of the liberal arts aspect of that college, and it's something that I regret. So,
absolutely, and some of the words J. Wayne Stark used are even more poignant today. He said, right. Don't kid yourself that you're going to study these things after you graduate and get into the workforce. Right. You're not. You're not going to go study Shakespeare, medieval history, the philosophy of art once you're out of here. You have to do it now. And so I say that's more poignant now because you can learn all those things on YouTube.
You can, yeah.
But you're not going to, right? You're not. So don't lie to yourself.
There's not enough time in the day. That's right.
No, you're not going to do it. So do it while you're at an institution dedicated to learning. So that was the best advice I ever got, and that's how I ended up getting the 2 degrees.
Okay,
I guess.
Right. So then you go. So what were the degrees that you got at Harvard? What were those 2?
Business and government. So technically, MBA, business administration, and MPA, public administration.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So then you asked about the career path. I'll try to do that quickly. So the cool part about my educational pathway is that when I got out of A&M, I went to work for a strategy consulting firm called McKinsey and Company. And they're like this big 100-year-old global problem-solving services company. And the cool thing about that gig was if you work 2 or 3 years and you get into a top business school, they would pay for it. And so I did my 2 master's.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah. And McKinsey paid for the MBA. And so, on the one hand, when I graduated Harvard, I had a net worth of negative $50,000. On the other hand, it wasn't $150,000. So it's felt very good.
You got to look at the positive side of things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And so then I went back to work for McKinsey, which I loved. I got to see the world, work with smart people, work on a whole bunch of different topics. It's an incredible learning curve. It's a very steep learning curve there. So I did strategy consulting for a long time. And then as strategy consultants do, they got an irresistible job offer from a client. So my client was Siemens, a big German conglomerate, and they wanted me to shake up the cell phone market because it had been stagnant. This is a long time ago. And so I went to work for a client. And then, after that, it just kind of rolled into one opportunity to the next. I ended up at Brightstar, which is the world's largest cell phone distribution company, as COO. And then the big gig, I was chairman and CEO of a $1 billion cell phone distribution company based in New York. And after all that, I decided that I was going to be a passionpreneur, and I was going to put all of this energy and all these learnings that I'd had into businesses that I was genuinely passionate about, which is what I do now.
Well, you're right. But in my talking with you, this question comes from just my own personal experience, right? So I kind of followed a similar path. I don't have the 2 degrees from either organization, but I did go into the financial services business and all. But I feel like your path was more intentional than mine. I feel like in talking to you, you had a goal in mind as you were going through these various experiences and as you were moving through these various organizations. And if I'm correct in our discussion, you were really on a balanced path, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But that's fair, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I had in mind the entire time that I was working, from 22 years old when I got out of A&M, that I was going to build capabilities. I was going to build financial security. So I was a big saver. Like, I always saved more than I earned. And the point of that was that then there was going to come a day where I was going to marry my skills and my passions. They were going to be the same thing. And so the whole time that was the plan. I even had, back then, a little spreadsheet that had, here's how much the associate makes, and the engagement manager, and the senior engagement manager, and the junior partner, right? Here's how much they make, and here's how much I'm going to spend, and here's how much I'm going to save, and this is how many years it's going to take to have $1 million in the bank. But my notion of working at something that I was passionate about, it didn't go past it. That was it. I didn't know what that meant. So when I was 36 years old, I put a note to my BlackBerry. You probably remember, Joe, we used to have BlackBerries on our belts, and we thought we were cool, like gunslingers, because you thought you were cool with your BlackBerry. And I put a note on my 40th birthday on the calendar that said stop. And what that meant to me was stop doing what the economy expects you to do and figure out what it is that you genuinely love and go do that. And so then I gave myself 4 years to figure that out. And it was only 1 year later that it hit me like a ton of bricks that it was Renaissance Festival. Like, that's the thing. That's the thing I've loved my whole life.
Right.
And like, it just as a data point.
What percentage of people do you think have that type of intentionality when they start a career? My sense is that it's a small percentage.
It is small. So I'll tell you I think the answer is 20%. And I'll tell you why. There's a professor at Stanford named Bill Damon. He's kind of the leading thinker on young adults and adolescents. And he's been studying young adults and adolescents for like 40 plus years. Right. And he has this categorization. And one of the groups is purposeful. And purposeful means you have an end game in mind and you're taking steps to achieve that end game. And that's at 20%. As opposed to, the other segments are like, dabblers. They're just kind of trying a bunch of stuff, which I would call the experiment path. There's disengaged, so people who are checked out. And there are dreamers, people who say they have an end game and they've got a big idea, but they're not taking steps in that direction. So 20% in Bill Damon segmentation are purposeful. And for the most part, people let life happen to them. And that's the point of my book, is that you will be more joyful, productive, content if you don't do what life hands you as a default. You actually make the decision for yourself, what the relationship between your passion and your work are going to be.
Well, it's interesting because I'd be interested to count the number of times, but I feel like the word purposeful was used in almost every chapter of your
probably.
It's probably the most frequently used word that I bounced across when I went through it. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because it was kind of at the beginning of the book, you talk about living a good life, and there's a definition of that with health, love, play, and then you have purposeful work, and that's where Purposeful shows up first. But then you talk about living an ideal life, right? So you can live a good life and living an ideal life. And can you talk a little bit about how those two things are different? I mean, are you living one versus the other, or is ideal a offshoot of, okay, you've checked all the boxes on living a purposeful life, and now the ideal life is really taking that to the next level?
Sure. So in my view, the ideal life, there's not one definition of that. It's your ideal life. It's one of the questions I really like to ask in my executive coaching practice is, what does your ideal life look like? And I think it's really valuable to kind of step back and answer that question. What does my ideal life look like? Then,
how often should you be asking yourself that question? And when should you start? If you had to do it all over again, right? You're starting over. Would you be asking yourself that right as you kind of began the journey?
Yeah, I think it's never too early to ask that question, because then the purposeful life is pushing you toward the ideal life. Right. That's the purposeful life, especially as in your younger years, is taking the steps to get to your ideal life. It's rare that your ideal life is something that's achievable when you're 22. So sometimes you have to take that purposeful life to march toward the ideal life. But yeah, I ask that question of my coaching clients every January. And what's fascinating is, they always come up with something. And what's really fascinating, these are CEOs, they're very successful people.
Right.
And they always describe something that's different than today. And then if they ever ask me, what does your ideal life look like? I say it's this. I'm in it.
You're in it right now.
I play dress up and swing swords at my friends for a living. Like, I'm in it. And and if you ask the question, what do you want your life to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? They all say something very different than what they're doing. And I think the goal is to have the answer be, I generally want to be doing in 10 years what I'm doing now. Now I'm still ambitious, and I didn't have to write a book.
Right.
And so there's still growth and there's still getting better. But, I like to be in the ideal life. I think I'm in it, and I want to stay in it until I'm dead.
Well, I feel like everyone chases the do something you love theme, right? You hear that. Every business book is talking about, this whole concept of, if you do something you love, then you don't work a day of your life. Yeah. That old saying, whatever it is. But it's interesting to me that you talk to successful senior executives and you ask them what their ideal life is, and they're telling you that they're not in it yet, right?
That's right.
Right. And my wife and I talk about this a lot because, the clock's ticking, right? And you have this sense of what your ideal anything is, and it's somewhere out there in the future, but the future is a lot closer than you think, right? So you have to actually get on it and not wait for it, because you just don't really know what you're going to be looking at in a year, 2 years, 5 years. So how does someone get there? Should they get there? So you have a CEO, super successful, making a lot of money, whatever, in his community, leader in the community, big job, but that's not his definition of an ideal life. Should he or she be moving or trying to move in that direction as rapidly as possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think even if you are, by general metrics, a success, like all the things that you described, but you're not living your ideal life, I think you should be always taking steps toward the ideal life. You should have a plan. Like, I'm a big proponent of, here's my plan. By this date, I'm going to be combining my work and my passion. They're going to be the same thing.
Right.
And I think that intentionality, making that plan and moving towards that ideal life, makes you more joyful, productive, and content on the way, because you know where you're going. You have purpose, right? And purpose is the antidote to anxiety and depression. So having that plan and that purpose, and you're moving in a direction, you know where you're going, I think is really healthy for people.
Well, it's interesting because if I look at my career, as you were talking, I'm like, okay, I checked that box. Yes, I'm a saver. Yes, I have. There were reasons that I wanted to save, but I did not connect that final box of what is it that you actually want to do? I kind of fell into that. It was happenstance. It was not, it was a less than scientific method. I wasn't trying to get there. I just kind of got there. And I wonder, doing that through your career, it's a little scary, right? Because you can be in a job and you can have success and you can be making a lot of money and it's not what you really want to do. But taking that step and saying, this is not ideal for me, and so now I need to go chase that. And that may mean leaving my job, entering a different industry, starting over, moving backwards to some extent. How did you reconcile all of that?
We'll talk about the book in a little bit, but
Yeah.
I had this idea of this balanced path where I'm going to take several years, many years, to create financial security for myself, build a very broad set of skills so that when the day comes that my work and my passion are the same thing, I'm financially secure and I have a whole bunch of skills.
Right.
So that's how I reconciled that. So I loved my work, be it in cell-phone distribution or strategy control. I loved it. It was great, but it wasn't my passion. And I knew that the whole time. So
But you were
that
building
work was a means to
skills
an end.
that were going to provide you with the ability to move in that direction. And so it was almost like you're investing in yourself, not doing
Absolutely.
exactly what you want, but you're making these decisions that are investing in that future that you're trying to get to. Is that-
Exactly right. And
Okay.
that all those skills that I developed in what I call the real world increase the probability of success of my passion work later on. So I run a theme park, but I've got all these skills and I had the financial security before I started. And so that dramatically increased the probability of success, that's what an investment is doing.
Well, it feels super important and relevant and timely, this discussion, because in a lot of the things that I read, and we'll talk a little bit about mental health of kind of the young adults, this kind of feeling of helplessness that people are experiencing right now. If you get on this path that you're talking about, that's outlined in your book, right, that gives you this kind of step-by-step way of kind of assessing that and then adjusting, it would seem to me that the feeling of helplessness is because you haven't really thought about your ability to control that pathway at all. It's just being heaped upon you. You're at a job that you don't like. Things are swirling. Time condenses. Kids are crying. Everything is kind of swirling around you at once. And if you don't have that path in your mind, you tend to fall into feelings of depression, helplessness, et cetera. So I'm wondering, just by setting that path up, whether that is, one key step in getting yourself kind of back on the journey of moving towards something that is purposeful and
Yeah, you just very well described the why of my book. That's the why. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. It's like 40% of young adults in America describe, they say they have persistent feelings of hopelessness. And, any psychologist will tell you that purpose is the antidote to hopelessness. And so that's the whole point of the book is there's not one way that your passion and your work should relate to each other. There's 5 different ways, right? One of them, which is independent, meaning your passion and your work don't have anything to do with each other. The work is a means to follow the passion on the weekends.
Right.
And so it's intentionally choosing one of those 5 paths, and then you get kind of a game plan to go execute that. That's what gives you purpose. You know what your path is because you decided, you went through the framework, you picked one of the 5, and now there's this game plan, and you've got the game plan. So that's what's giving you purpose, is going toward that goal.
Okay, so let's jump then. Let's jump into the book a little bit, because I just found the book fascinating. As I said, it's up here. It's Don't Settle. It's on Amazon. I got the hardcover. I actually love the cover of the book. I wasn't really paying attention, but I'm like, wow, that kind of covers a couple of things. It's like, are you targeting? Are you doing things intentionally? And there's, you shoot arrows at Renaissance Fair. So I thought there was kind of a interesting kind of correlation to those two things. But let me start by asking a simple question. When you say don't settle, what What is settle? What's the definition of settle to you?
Yeah, I say don't settle for the work that the economy pushes you into,
Okay.
because the economy will push everybody into something.
Right.
And I'm saying don't settle for that. You choose, right? You choose the way your passion and your work are going to relate to each other, and then you choose to execute the plan on the chosen path. Don't settle for what the default position that the economy will put you in. By the way, I do want to riff for a second on the cover, because it's even more meaningful.
Is it really?
Half of the women on Team USA Archery are from Sherwood Forest Faire, which is my theme park.
Say that again. Half of the women
on Team USA Archery are from my show.
Wow.
And so they're not my archers, but the archers that are in my community, they have something like 70 world, national, or state records or championships, right? You can have a record, an all-time record. You can have a championship for a year. And we got over 70 records and championships in this community. We're a deeply archery-focused group. And in fact, inside the cover of the book, it has like the cover is dedicated to the Sherwood Forest Faire archery community.
Well, you know, it's amazing, because when you think about Renaissance fairs, you think people dressing up, having a good time, and all of that. But there's a lot to that, and we'll come back to that. But let's just dive and talk a little bit about these 5 pathways that you mentioned, because you and I have been talking about this, and I said that you were on the balanced path, and there's an intentional path. Is it intentional? It's
independent. I mentioned,
right,
yeah.
Right. Passion, independent, money, experimental, and balanced. Correct.
That's it.
All right. So, can you, without giving them so much that they're not going to want to buy the book, but can you? Let's talk a little bit about that, because this whole concept of whether you're young, middle-aged, my age, chasing that kind of purposeful, meaningful life for yourself, getting on one of these paths and at least understanding what your path is super important, right? So maybe you could just, for the audience's benefit, walk down those five real quick.
Sure, I'll just define them real quickly. So the passion path means your passion and your work are the same thing. And in the book, I lay out a specific set of circumstances where that's the right answer for you. And the short version is you know what your passion is. You can make enough money at it to satisfy your financial needs. So if you can make enough money to satisfy your financial needs while working at a passion, then you should do that. The problem is your financial needs typically should be quite low for you to try to work at your passion in your 20s.
Right.
Then there's the independent path, where your passion and your work don't have anything to do with each other. I always joke when I give my book talk at Texas A&M, and I say, if your only passion is smoking pot and playing video games, that's probably not going to be your work. And the professor always said, I got this good friend, Ken McFarland, he teaches strategy at the Mays Business School, and he always says, you can monetize pot and video games. I said, yeah, but you're not going to monetize smoking pot and playing video games. Very unlikely. Very unlikely. So that's independent path. Experiment path is go try a bunch of things, expose yourself to a lot of different activities while having your mind open to that spark of passion that you can dig into. So that's typically for people who don't quite know what their passion is. Then there's the money path. We all know the people who went to Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, and they're just not going to have peace until they have financial security.
Right.
And so they're chasing the dollar. And then my great hope for them is that after they scratch that itch, they'll hop over to the passion path later. And then the balance path, which is the one that I did. It's you've decided early on you want your passion and your work to be the same thing, but you're going to take your time getting there. You're going to build financial security. You're going to build skills. You're going to build network, brand. You're going to build what it is you need to increase the probability of success when you switch over to work at your passion later in life. That's the balance path. It's very intentional, and that working on what you need to increase the probability of success of your work and your passion being the same thing, that could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
You can You can jump around from path to path, can't you? I mean,
You can. In the book, there's a chapter on each of the 5 paths that lays out the work plan.
yeah,
And then toward the end of each of those chapters, it has a path switching section, which is here are the conditions under which you would change, and here are the most likely paths for you to switch to. I also tend to think at the end of the day, everybody can end up on the passion path. For example, like the passion, clearly. Independent, there's a lot of people that have this philosophy, which I quite like. A third of your life is learning, a third of your life is earning, and a third of your life is giving back. There are a lot of people on the independent path that retire, and then they spend 10, 20 years following their passion after they've retired, right? And then the money path, there's 2 different mindsets to wealth. There's more is better and enough is enough. The more is better people tend not to get off of the rat race.
Right.
The enough is enough people often will get off of the rat race and turn to the passion path. The experiment path is trying to figure out what your passion is. Well, if you find it and the conditions are correct, then you may end up on the passion path. And of course, the balance path is intentionally getting to the passion path over a number of years. So everybody can end up there. But I think that's the power of the framework is you don't have to start there. And I think, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and the world is telling her to follow her heart, follow her passion. I think it's terrible advice. Absolutely terrible advice.
really,
You may get there. You may have your work and your passion be the same thing, but it could be now, it could be 20 years from now, or anything in between. And so I think that's the power of the framework is you make that choice. Don't just because everybody says follow your heart when you're 17 doesn't mean that's wise. I don't think that's wise.
So what if you know what your passion is, and the monetary part of that passion is something that comes traditionally at a later date. So you're just going to have to suffer. You know what you want to do, and you're not experimenting. You are just locked in, and money is not your driver, right? But you found what you want. I mean, is your recommendation that? It sounds like your recommendation to me is, well, that's great. So you've already found it, but the balanced path may be a better way for you to, finally achieve, that passion that you're searching for and solidify it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I can boil that down pretty easily. If you know what your passion is and you can make money at it, and let's say you're in your early 20s, I guess it doesn't matter how old you are. Then the question is, what is your need for financial security? And I treat that as an independent variable, your need for financial security. And we've got a little tool that ends up in high, medium, low. Yeah. If your need for financial security is low and you know how to make money in a passion, then go for it. Yeah. But if your need for financial security is medium or high, then you should think real hard about, can you achieve that following your passion now? Because if you can't, you should probably go on the balance path, which is, you're going to dabble in your passion on the side, but do like a real world job and put some money in the bank and build some skills so that then you can meet your financial security goals when you switch over to following your passion.
Well, it's interesting because it feels like we're in a pendulum moment a little bit. Let me see if I can explain what I mean by that. So my parents were, they coached me and guided me. It wasn't the money path, but it was it was like, you need to go out and become financially independent as quickly as you possibly can, because financial independence carries with it all of these things that make your life easier. It was never really go out and do what your heart tells you to do. It was like, you need to find a job, right? And that job needs to pay you, and you need to stand up on your own 2 feet and go out and, start to be a productive person in the world, right? And I feel like this generation, and I was at the very end of the baby boom generation, right? The baby boom generation has been getting derisively, all these comments about how they pursued this. They followed a generation that was, built on sacrifice, and, in many ways, I think was one of the most innovative generations, coming back from, World War II and all the building that occurred. And I think that a baby boom generation has maybe been eviscerated a little bit too much. I mean, they were just put in a position where their parents were successful, but there was a path that those parents took, and it was all about sacrifice. It was not about follow your passion. It was about, you need to do the following things, and you need to worry about that, right? You need to go out, and I think that it really was more along that money path than the other paths. So now we have these generations that have been told so often, forget about all that. It's the wrong way to do it. The baby boom generation's terrible. Look at all the greed. Look at all the things that they've ruined. You really need to be someone who thinks about this in a more passionate way and does things not for the greed of it, but for the passion of it. But to your point, there's a balance here, right? And it feels to me like if that first generation had swung too far this way, this generation is now being fed these things that aren't really realistic, right? It's like you need to have a little bit of these different pathways early in your life. Like I look at my life, I got out and it was like, just find a job and then just get paid. And it was like, okay, now I'm getting paid, so let's see how much money that we can make. But then I, at some point, woke up in my career and said, this is all great, but more is not necessarily better. And what is this next path? I mean, it's very funny. So you say more is better. One of my early bosses, he's a phenomenal leader, but we were at an offsite, and he was asking me, how are things going? How's your career? And I was talking to him about stuff. He goes, how you feeling about your income? And I said, well, I'm feeling pretty good. And he looked at me and he said, the thing about money is no matter how much money you have, you can always use a little more. And it was a comment. We were literally walking down this path, and it was a comment, and it has stuck with me forever because it's true, right? If you're on that path and money is the only thing driving you, it will drive you, in my opinion, to insanity because, if that's how you're judging your value or net worth, or you're standing yourself up against your neighbors, there's always going to be a neighbor with a nicer car, bigger house, whatever. And that's just the definition of insanity to me. So it was interesting because it triggered me, and I said, okay, I understand what he's saying. But then I got to this next piece, and it was like, my passion and where I'm going has way less to do with the monetary, and it has way more to do with what am I doing with my life? Do I get up every morning, and am I purposeful and happy with what I'm doing? And there's a huge value. It may not be monetary. Startup, so right now it's definitely not monetary, but there are non-monetary things that are of huge value as well. So a little bit of a ramble there, but I'm interested. Do you see those same types of kind of swings that I'm seeing?
100%. So yeah. I'm Gen X, and I was told the same thing by my baby boomer parents.
Right.
That's, get your degree in accounting and go to work and pay taxes. Right. That was the thing.
That was the guidance right there.
Yeah. In fact, it was even, I think this is pretty bad advice. My father, who's an accountant, said, major in accounting at A&M, take an extra class or two each semester and graduate in 3 years so that you can get out, get a job, start paying taxes. It's just terrible advice. Like, it's the antithesis to the good advice that I talked about earlier. But that was the mindset. So that was this pendulum over here. And yeah, I'm definitely seeing that, the world is telling young people, follow your passion. And I think it's terrible advice. That's one of 5 pathways when you're young, and there's a certain set of conditions where following your passion at 20 years old is the right thing to do. But that's only true for about 20% of the people, right? Each of my 5 paths has a significant audience. So you really got to.
So there's a difference then between following your passion and knowing what your passion is and creating a strategy that enables you to get there as quickly as possible. Is that
exactly
a fair statement?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, what, as we talked about a minute ago, The balanced path is all about increasing your chances of success following your passion. I think you go out and you work for 10 years and you see the world and you learn a lot. Your chances are much higher of succeeding at, say, monetizing a passion than they are if you start at that at 20 years old.
So you started this 5 paths piece really started with this whole concept of Ikigai, correct? I mean, that's where it first began, right? And maybe fill the listeners in a little bit there, because in reading your book, my sense was that was a good starting point, but it was missing pieces. Is that a fair statement to make?
That's a fair statement. So the Ikigai framework is I've been infatuated with for decades. There's actually you can't see it, but it's printed out and taped to the back of my desk right there. So the Ikigai is a Japanese word that means reason for being. And there's these 4 concentric circles: what you love, what you can get paid for, what the world needs, and what you're good at. Those are the 4 circles. And the idea of Ikigai is if you're spending your time where all 4 of the circles intersect. So you're spending your time on something you're good at, you love, the world needs, and get paid for it. That's your reason for being. That's your Ikigai. And so I had thought about this for decades. And what I found is that it wasn't tactical. There's nothing to implement there. You can put 10 bullet points on each of the 4 circles and find nothing in the middle. So then at some point I was like, there's something wrong with this framework. It's not working, right? It's not leading me to make decisions. And so then what I concluded was 3 of the circles are highly overlapping. So what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for are very overlapping circles, right? It's hard to get paid for something that the world doesn't need, right? It's hard to get paid for something if you're not good at it.
Right.
So I thought those 3 circles were so overlapping. And I thought, okay, wait, where do I go with that? And then I had this notion that I could take all 4 circles, and make one question. And so that one question that synthesizes the Ikigai framework is, can you monetize a passion? So the can you monetize means the world needs it, you're good at it, and get paid for it. That's all captured. And can you monetize a passion? That's the I love it. And so I took the 4 circles of Ikigai and made one question. Can you monetize a passion? And then I arrayed that against your need for financial security, high, medium, low. And that's my core framework that then leads to one of the 5 pathways.
Okay, so you finally put this down in paper, but that was basically the pathway that you had been following without like really thinking through the various components. Is that fair? I mean,
I was following the balanced path very intentionally, but I hadn't really put words onto the other paths. Like I could see people on the independent path because they're just doing what the economy expects them to do.
Right.
I can see people on the experiment path because they don't know what their passion is. And I could see people on the passion path at a young age. Like I could see all that. And I was very much choosing the balanced path. And over time, when I created the framework, I put names on those things, names on the 5 paths. But yeah, I could see them out in the world. But I hadn't put names on them until I wrote the book.
Okay, well, it's a phenomenal read, and I think that you do an excellent job of walking the reader through the logic behind how you got there, and then actually painting a pathway that people can use to really start to think about some of these things. Because once again, I really think that a lot of the angst that's existing right now is just because people feel like they don't have control. They don't have control over where their life is going. They're stuck in something that they don't like, and they don't know how to get out of it and start thinking about, okay, what do I mean by get out of it, right? What does that mean? And I think it's an excellent read.
I do want to throw something in there on this, the anxiety and the hopelessness that a lot of young people are feeling. So I think the world is telling 17, 18, 19-year-olds, follow your passion. And I've said that I think that's a disservice. But think about how much pressure you're putting on them. First, you have to know what your passion is. Well, most 18-year-olds don't know what their passion is. Then you have to take steps to be able to make money at it. And they're saying that's the only way to live your life. That's a lot of pressure. If you're 17, like, okay, I've got to go make money at something I'm passionate about. That's a really awful thing to brainwash an 18-year-old into, because there's so much pressure, and like half of them don't know what their passion is. Like they need to go out and do stuff, right? They got to go travel. Like, my favorite example of just going to figure it out is Matthew McConaughey. I'm in Austin, Texas, so he's like our icon here. He's our guy. He's our guy. And he wrote a biography called Green Lights. And what he did after high school when he was 18, he did a gap year, and he went to Australia for a year, and he did like 6 completely different jobs over that year. And I don't even remember what they are, but it's like fisherman and lawyer's assistant and barista and whatever, like car mechanic. I mean, he just did 6 completely different things to understand how different people are getting by in this world. And he credits that with, a lot of understanding about how the world works and just exposure to things and as you continue to expose yourself to things, you might get that spark of, wait, this turns me on. I'm in. I like it. And so then you dig, work, and you find, oh, wait, I'm passionate about that. And this is awesome.
Well, and this is generalization, but I think it's a pretty broad generalization. I mean, I feel like our children these days have been pre-programmed by their parents to think in a specific way. I mean, when I grew up, you played 5 different sports. I wasn't good at any of them, but I played, right? And now, you can't do that. You have to specialize. You have to choose before you even know what you're good at. You have to choose what sport it is, right? Are you going to play hockey? Or are you going to play lacrosse? You're a football player. And then you're down that specialized path, and you've now abandoned the ability to look around and see whether that's something that is really what truly interests you. And then it follows you to secondary schooling. I'm on the East Coast. We see this a lot here, right? It is like there is a pathway you take, and it starts with sports, and it's secondary school, and then there are a certain number of colleges that are acceptable, and then you go in and you get your degree, and you go to Wall Street and you buy and sell securities, and it's like the pathway has been provided for you. And that is how success is defined, right? And we've pulled the child's ability to experiment and to take a balanced approach away from them to some extent, which feels to me like it's part of the reason that we're running up against some of this, because we have really pounded on our children that experimentation is not allowed. Right? You have to go down these certain paths. And trust us, we're living in this wonderful suburb in this beautiful house. The pathway that I chose, which was head down, good job, make money, save, pay taxes, is the only way to do it. Right?
Yeah, I think the exact same thing. And that's kind of the reason I wrote the book, is that all the other books on, how to choose what you're going to do for a living they were either, this is what I did, so you should do that too,
right.
Kind of what you just described, or it's as simple as, do what you're good at so you can get paid. And I think those are just too simple. Right. And so that's why I created this framework to choose one of 5 different ways your passion and work can relate. But like think of all the books out there they're just sort of self-aggrandizing, right? It's here's what I did and it worked, do that. Like that's not good advice. Not everybody's the same,
Yep, that's so true. So let's jump into the kingdom a little bit, because the kingdom is your passion. It sounds to me like you wanted to own, operate, and run a Renaissance fair for a long time. It was part of your goal, but just walk people through what this is, right? And how you got there, because I think that I'd like to hear a little bit about that backstory, but then I want to talk about how participants and attendees at these fairs, right, in many ways are there for a lot of the reasons that you and I have just been talking about around some of these other things. So,
yeah, very true. So just, most major cities in America have a Renaissance festival. Yours is King Richard's Fair. It's in Carver, south of Boston. It's been going on for like 44 years or something. Right. So Renaissance Festival, it's a theme park where the theme is usually like, 15th century England, or maybe 16th century England, where King Henry VIII is in charge, or Queen Elizabeth I is in charge. That's this idea of a Renaissance festival. Mine is technically a medieval festival because our setting is the 1190s. And in England, 1190s, it's Robin Hood and Richard the Lionheart, Prince John, Sheriff of Nottingham, all that stuff. So it's a theme park, and you watch jousting and falconry and jugglers and comedy and music, and you drink mead and eat turkey legs and all those kind of things. And you just have a
bow and arrows and throw axes
and play games, throw axes.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a very unique day of fun outside. So that's what the business is. And for me, I went to the Texas Renaissance Festival outside of Houston on a junior high field trip, big yellow school bus, Yeah. And I remember walking in there thinking, oh, wow, I really feel like I fit here. This kind of feels like I'm supposed to be here. And so then I think it was like I was 13 years old, and I didn't go when I was, I think, 14 or 15. But then when I was 16, I got a car, a really old piece of crap car. But anyway, so then I went to the Texas Renaissance Festival at least once per season, 38 years in a row. And that was 5 years living in College Station, 3 years in Boston, 3 years in Germany, a year in England, a year in Russia, a year in Australia. I always went back to not miss my streak because it's the thing that I loved. And then, 18, 19 years ago, a friend of mine said that TRF, Texas Renaissance Festival, is for sale. And that was this thunderclap moment of, oh, wait, that's it. That's what when I've been telling myself for years, I want my work and my passion to be the same thing. That's it. And it had never really occurred to me that the Renaissance Festival was a business. It was just this thing that I loved. That once you got to October and the weather's nice, I was just giddy with excitement to go enjoy the show. But once I thought about it as a business, I'm like doing a little math. I'm like, wait, somebody owns that and they're making money doing that. I'm like, okay, that's it. And so then that's how I tried to buy TRF, and it didn't work, although it just got sold like 2 years ago. And then I tried to buy the one for Dallas, and that fell apart at the 11th hour. Literally the day before closing, it fell apart. And then so I just found a business partner, and we built Sherwood Forest Faire outside of Austin together.
So you stood it up on your own. It wasn't there.
We built it. Yeah, we built it. Yeah.
That's
with
incredible.
a partner. And the partner is now retired and living in Portugal. So he's living his best life in a different way.
Oh, that's cool. And it's important to note that it's not a put it up, tear it down fair. It is hard buildings, 25 acres, if I recall correctly.
That's right. It's a permanent village. So the village proper is 25 acres, like 150 buildings.
Right.
So like all the artisans, not all the artisans, most of the artisans build their shop, like the boot maker and the hat maker and the glass blower and the jewelers, they build shops. And so they're permanent buildings out there. And then the fair builds bars and stages and wedding chapels and jousting arena and all this stuff.
And these artisans are truly artisans. I mean, I was looking on your website. I was looking at the archery, the bows that were literally constructed out of a piece of wood and then designed and all of that. And they're beautiful and functional. I mean, as you said, you've got some of the world's best archers that are out there. It's fascinating to me. How do these? So those people are chasing their passion as well, right? I mean, is an artisan, is that a full-time job for them, or are they typically doing other things and then this pops up on,
Yeah, for the most part, artisanship is their full-time job, and they travel from show to show. So the kind of standard paradigm in Renaissance Festival world is you run for 8 weekends when the weather's nice.
Right.
And so these artisans, say you're making hats or you're making boots or making jewelry, you'll do your 8 weekends at my show, and then you'll go do 8 weekends at another show and then another, and you may do 4 8-weekend shows a year, and that's your circuit. And so that's what they're doing. It's also the same with the stage acts are almost entirely professional, traveling the country doing this. So the jousters and the bands and the comedians and the jugglers and the falconer, they're doing this full time. And the people that are not so full time tends to be like the theatrical cast, which is where I spend a lot of my time. They tend to be locals, and they have regular 9-to-5 jobs during the week, and they're doing theater at the Renaissance Festival on weekends.
What's the growth metric of the industry. Has the industry been growing? I mean, it's very counterintuitive, right? I mean, we have all of this technologically driven things going on that are competing for the time of somebody to get in a car, go out to that festival. Attendance levels, I mean, have they been going up or going down? What have you seen?
It's a mixed bag. So I'll start. The Renaissance Festival business has been around since 1963. The first show was founded in Los Angeles in '63. It has a very cumbersome name. You'll love that from a branding point of view. It's the original Southern California Renaissance Pleasure Fair. So the name of the event has 7 words in it.
Can you see that picture?
Yeah.
Okay. That's my daughter there on the right, and she's at that festivals. They go every year. That's her boyfriend on the left, and they dress up every single year to go to it. They love it. Very cool.
But anyway, so it's been around a long time, and so a lot of the 40, 50-year-old shows, their attendance is sort of flat. They found that plateau.
Yeah.
And for the bigger ones, that plateau is quite nice. Like at the Texas Renaissance Festival, the big one, they entertain about 500,000 people in 17 days. But
wow.
That's kind of where it is, and it's been there for many years. My show, we've run for 16 years. So we're the new kid on the block, and we're about to turn 17 years old. And so our attendance is still growing.
Okay.
But the big 40-year-old shows, it tends to be fairly flat, but it grows a little bit. I actually think everyone having a dopamine machine in their pocket is going to be good for my business, because at some point you realize, God, I've got to get outside and look at human beings and test my other senses. Like I got to get out of here. And so there are a bunch of shows that are selling out. Like Maryland is a big show, Maryland Renaissance Festival, and they sold out a bunch of days. So the industry is doing well.
What's the allure to the show? And I think that maybe the answer to that has changed over the last 2 decades or so. The allure when they've kind of first started out versus today. But my daughter loves the Renaissance Fair. And I'm assuming that maybe half the people that attend, maybe that's a little higher. She dresses up. She immerses herself in the experience. She doesn't just go to walk around and see things. She actually goes, and it is a day of Renaissance. You're taking yourself back to a different time period. What do you think's driving that?
Yeah, no, my answer has been the same for 17 years. The fundamental value proposition of fair for patrons is escape.
Yes.
You're escaping the real world and your job and your stress and the people who have pissed you off and all of the shit in your life. You're escaping that. That's what you're doing at the Renaissance Festival, because you are pretending that you're in a different country in a different time period.
Right.
That's the point, is escape.
It's really interesting. I wonder if there's another point, which is human interaction, right? There's not a lot of that anymore. I mean, if you look at the last 20 years, what technology has done is pretty much eliminated a lot of that, where you're not interacting with people like we used to. Certainly not the way when I was growing up that you interacted, where your entire entertainment world was around interacting directly with individuals. Now you can basically go through life and not do that at all. But there's a fundamental, I think, human need to have that interaction. And I wonder if that's part of what's driving.
For sure. There is a lot of talking to strangers at the Renaissance Festival. There's a lot of connecting with people you've never met before.
Right. And it's almost a safe environment too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're talking with strangers, but everybody is there for kind of the same purpose. So it frees up that inhibition of kind of getting out of your shell and
that's right.
Fully enjoying that kind of human interaction.
That's it. My favorite example of that is, most fairs don't have this, but we have patron camping. So you can put a tent or pull in an RV and sleep there. Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. And on a Saturday night, our patron campground will have over 3,000 people there. And there are a bunch of them, like, say, the first 1,500 of them are there almost every weekend, and they camp in the same place every year with the same group of people every year. And there's these groups, so we call them clans, and they have the same spot every year, and they set up, and they have their little fire pit, and they have their traditions. But the important part is that the governing value of those people, call them Friends of Faire, the governing value in the campground on a Saturday night is welcoming. So if someone stumbles into your camp and says hello, your job, this is the deal. Like, the deal is you get to have your own space, and you get to camp in the same space every year, but you're going to be welcoming, and you're going to make sure, drunk guys don't start swinging fists at each other. Like, that's the deal. And it works. Like, it's a very welcoming environment. It's a very, human connectivity environment.
So with, the rise of AI and all this artificial intelligence that everyone is learning about, dealing with, integrating into their various aspects of their life, do you sense that that's going to have any impact on what you're doing, positive or negative? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, a lot. I think a lot about that. Two big themes come to mind. One is there is a private equity fund that's running around buying Renaissance festivals.
Really?
And the thesis is that the Renaissance Festival is the industry least likely to be negatively affected by AI. Which
makes perfect sense.
Once they said that to me, it's like, yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's it. So that's I think we are a little bit of a safe harbor as an industry from AI. That's one big thought that I talk to people about a lot. The other, though, is we are supporting artisanship. Almost anything that can be made by hand, 700 years ago, is being made by hand, right. at my place and other shows like this. And so there's always this attempt of people to try to put in AI art instead. And so myself, and I think most of the Renaissance Festival owners, we're battening down the hatches. Like, I have no interest in selling AI art. I have interest in an artist selling something they made with their hands that could have been done hundreds of years ago, right? That's the idea of what we're doing. And so we're kind of constantly having to say, no, we're not doing AI art around here. We're doing kind of old school historical art.
Well, it's just fascinating because it's completely counterintuitive, right? I mean, if you read and follow and watch what's going on, what your industry is, if you went by those definitions, it's outdated, right? I mean, AI is not going to be able to infiltrate it, right?
It's outdated by design, though.
Right, exactly. But it serves, I think, this super cool purpose of not only allowing people to escape from the everyday and surround themselves with like-minded individuals, but it gives you this human interaction. Because to me, the thing that I worry about AI, it's not that the technology is not going to be magnificent. I mean, if you think about finance, science, all of these areas where AI can have profound effects. I have the lottery. Someone just won the lottery using AI. I have a buddy who picks all of his NFL teams for his deal using AI. So there are all these really interesting things that it does. But what it definitely cannot do is it cannot replace human interaction. And the minute that you start to try and do that, whether it's in film, movies, art, music, and you take that human element out, it actually becomes hugely detrimental, in my opinion. And so it's going to be fascinating to me to see how we harness the power of this, and we put that power to use where it's really beneficial, but then keep it out of places where it can have a significant negative effect. I mean, you look at what technology has done to human beings over the last 20 years, social networks in general to our children, And now you look at AI and it's like technology on steroids, right? So I think it's super important that we're careful and wary to some extent of, what this new technology can and will do. And I think that having these bastions of, these locations and these things and activities that people can go to that take you back to what being human is all about is going to be more and more important. That's just my opinion. But
no, I think a lot about what you just said. So there's a study that's been going on from Harvard for 80 years where they followed several thousand people for the whole time. And every year or so, they would gather data on these people over an 80-year, 75-year time period. And the number one conclusion was that the top variable correlated with human happiness is quality of relationships with other people.
Right.
And so it turns out if you've got, 3 people in your life who you really have their back and they really have your back, that's the number one variable correlated with human happiness. And so as I coach,
and I think health too, it's happiness and health, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
health is next. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, I know a lot of 17-year-olds who would happily spend all of their time curled up on a couch with an iPad.
Right.
And not see other human beings. So either,
but they've been trained to do that, right?
Yeah, they're making bad choices doing that.
Right.
Or human beings have fundamentally changed from needing human interaction. And I don't think that's true.
I agree.
Which is why you've got like Jonathan Haidt out there saying, showing mathematically that the number of hours spent on social media is correlated with anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts in teenagers, especially teenage girls. So literally, the more hours on social media, if you're a 17-year-old girl, the more likely you are to have anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. And so I think 100 years from now, the story of this time period is going to be everybody got a dopamine machine in their pocket. And the story from historians is going to be, how did we deal with that?
Right.
And I think we're trying real hard now. Like, Jonathan Haidt is leading this charge to get smartphones out of schools, and it's working. Right? It's happening. Like something most states now have banned smartphones from classrooms, and we'll see. We'll see if it works.
Well, what's fascinating too. I read that. And I've read kind of the outcomes of that. Guess who's happiest about the cell phones out of the schools? The students,
the kids.
Themselves. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
As long as they're all doing it, and I'm not missing things, but we're all in the deal together. Once you remove that, I'm super happy that I don't have to interact with that thing on a 24/7
That's right.
basis.
I'm reading the same thing, and they're realizing, well, if I can't look at my phone, I guess I'm just going to talk to the person next to me. And that's what they ought to be doing.
Fascinating. Well, this is an excellent endpoint. And, I put these podcasts together, and I didn't really know, kind of where these things were going to go. And I've now found something that I'm passionate about because, the podcast that I'm doing is not advancing, like me personally, I'd have no interest in that, but it gives me the opportunity to just talk to fascinating people. You and I'm not sure would ever have met or talked if I didn't have this podcast. And I never would have read your book. I never would have thought about these things that you've brought up in the book and the intentionality of how you kind of live your life and live your life with purpose. And so it's been a wonderful experience for me, and this has been a great talk, and I really appreciate you taking time to do it.
Glad to do it. You should bring your daughter to Sherwood Forest Faire in March or April.
Okay. I mean, that would not be twisting her arm, right? Every time we go to California, she talks about, and it's that big, huge name out there, but they just absolutely love it. So yeah. I'll get her out there. I cannot let you go without the thing that people seem to like more than anything that I do, which is the lightning round quick hits.
Okay.
So if you got a couple minutes, I've got. Let's go with like 5 questions. What's your favorite quote?
Life is far too important a thing to be taken seriously. Oscar Wilde.
Favorite book?
Favorite book. Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Shamin.
Very nice. Very nice. How do you unplug, recharge? I think I may already know the answer to this, but
I work out a lot. I spend a lot of time on my health. And then when I really need to recharge, I'll disappear for a week. Like 3 weeks ago, I went to Cancun and just sat on the beach for a week.
So this is not on here, but it just kind of dawned on me. If you're in living your life of passion, do you need to unplug? Do you need to like reset? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Oddly enough, I do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, it's still work. And,
It is still work.
something I like to tell people is there's no such thing as a life that's 10 steps forward and 0 steps back.
Right.
Humans are too complicated to let that happen. So like the best you can do is 9 steps forward and 1 step back. That's as good as life gets. But then sometimes, bad things happen. Like someone gets hurt or you get sued or whatever. And, there's always some stress, even when you're working at your passion. So yeah, I do. I have to unplug once in a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. I try to, obviously unplug in that way, but I think it's super important to find time during the day to unplug. Like it's a beautiful day here in Boston. It's Friday afternoon, so I'm going to go throw some wood on the fire in the backyard and just kind of look at the trees and watch the leaves fall, maybe have a bourbon with something in it or something here. And that sounds pretty good to me.
That sounds compelling.
One piece of advice for someone who wants to have an impact on the world or someone wanting to get on this kind of living a life of passion, is there one piece of advice you could give to somebody who's this is resonating with?
Yeah, it's make a decision on how your passion and your work are going to relate to each other now, and then revisit that on a regular basis to see if that changes.
Awesome. I'm going to stop us there. I think that's a perfect way to end the podcast. And once again, I really appreciate you taking time. I know you're super busy. And it's just been a pleasure getting to know you, a pleasure meeting you. And I hope people pull as much out of this as I have. So thanks for the time.
Awesome. Glad to do it, Joe.
All right, George. Take it easy.
Ciao.